Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Quick one for you today. But if you're interested in a couple different pocket cameras, I had two sitting here in front of me that I want to discuss real quick. The Fuji XF10, as you've seen in the last few videos, and the Panasonic LX10. I'm not going to go through a huge in-depth review of these, but I want to discuss a couple different things. And the reason why I bring these two up is because I got both of these for around $300. And the whole objective for me to have one of these cameras is everyday carry for street, maybe occasional video, although not so much likely, but just to practice photography on a regular basis. You guys have already heard me talk about this quite a bit. Still testing a little bit, the verdict's out on it. So far, I like it. It's a little slow on a couple things, but overall I like the XF10. I'm fairly happy with it. But let's talk about a few different areas of these two cameras. The first is ergonomics. A short answer, XF10. It's got a better grip. It's got the little joystick here to move your autofocus point, and it just fits in the hand better than this does. This is actually a little bit slippery, not bad, and when I rest my thumb, it actually rests up here on the screen. Not the best for ergonomics, but it still gets the job done and does okay. Now, that's just for pure photography functionality. The one thing that the XF10 does not have, that the LX10 does have, is this screen right here. For any kind of vlogging or selfie stuff, this is a win. But also, if you're shooting street photography or whatever and you're looking down like this, you can see the screen, whereas on the XF10, you gotta kind of get eye level with the screen to see really what's going on. So I would say the LX10 from a screen perspective is better, but ergonomics, I give it in general to the XF10. And I would say, well, let me make one caveat to that statement. The aperture ring, I'm a fan of these. Even though you can actually bump yourself into a different aperture, it makes it quick to get the exposure triangle. So if you're shooting in manual, you can make this front ring ISO, this is aperture, and this can be shutter speed. And you can do the same thing here. ISO, or aperture, shutter speed, and ISO if you want to do it like that, which is how I've got this set up. The only time it becomes a little bit of an issue is you go to manual focus. Now this ring doesn't do the ISO anymore, so you have to kind of set your exposure and then kick it over to manual focus. It's just two different workflows. But overall, I would say ergonomics, I'm going with the XF10. So now let's move into the other area that's important, and that is image quality / sensor size. I'm not going to go in-depth preview. There's a ton of stuff out on the internet about these two, but this is an APS-C sensor. This is a 1-inch sensor. Crop factor of 1.5, crop factor of 2.7. Quite a big difference, but on these two cameras, the lenses kind of make a big difference. This is a Leica. Let's see, 24 to 72, zoom range 1.4 to 2.8. This is a fixed 18.5 millimeter, 28 millimeter equivalent, 2.8 aperture. Typically, an APS-C sensor is going to be better image quality, and that is the case here. You get bigger photo sites and other technical jargon I don't want to go into, but what's interesting about this is I don't think this camera handles ISO that fantastic. And of course, you go to a smaller sensor, the ISO performance goes even lower. Typically, bigger sensors handle a higher ISO performance a little better. There are other things that go into that, like backside illumination and the processors and that kind of stuff. I'm aware of that, but in general, bigger sensors handle higher ISO a little bit better. So what's interesting about this is that your maximum aperture is 2.8. On this, it's 1.4, which is 2 stops more on the aperture ring, or 2 more stops in terms of aperture that you get for the exposure triangle. So what's interesting is that something in this might be 6400 ISO, this would only be 1600 ISO, 3200 ISO, 800 ISO. And so from that perspective, you actually get about, I guess I would say it's about a trade-off in terms of what it's able to handle, sensor and aperture versus sensor and aperture on this, if that makes a lot of sense. In other words, this can handle ISO 3200 similar to how this can handle ISO 800 or even 1600. So the lens kind of negates that a little bit. Now, of course, there's difference in image quality when it comes to how the sensors perform, but from a high ISO performance, it's interesting. Not as big of a difference as you would think. In fact, it just could be some differences in the way that the processor's handling it, but I got some pretty sharp images out of this. So that part's interesting. Now let's talk about depth of field. Like I said, the APS-C sensor has a 1.5 times crop. This has a 2.7 times crop. So, I gotta do the math in my head. let's see, 2.8 aperture, 1.5. It's like a full frame equivalent depth of field of 4.2. Of course, different things affect depth of field besides just aperture, but if all things considered the same, this is like an f4.2 in full frame. This, at 1.4 times 2.7, I think it's like 3.8. So you actually get a little bit shallower depth of field on this camera if you're at 1.4, which means you're at 24 millimeters. As you zoom in, it goes to 2.8, but then you also get the benefit of extra compression. And so it's actually not that big of a difference if you think about it. So that's interesting as well. Now, let's talk about a couple things that are important to me besides the ergonomics, and it's the startup time. This right here starts up quick. That's pretty fast. Off. Bearing lens movement, I see something, boom, hit the button, I'm shooting. That's pretty fast. That's important. I see something I want to see here, not as fast. Off, takes a second. I think this part to me is probably the most concerning. Now, if you're gonna go shoot street and you know you're gonna do it, you just turn the automatic lens retraction off, right? Or make it to a long automatic sleep mode, and then you walk around like this. So not a big deal. You can get around it, but that's interesting in terms of fast performance and getting things going quickly. I took a couple portraits of my daughter. They're not really good portraits. The fact I got her to stand still was a miracle in itself. But I said, hey, stand here real quick, and I took a portrait at its widest aperture and widest focal length versus this at its widest aperture and it's only got one focal length, so that's that. I'll put these two photos up now. You can see the difference. They're both in their standard JPEG settings. So this is Pro Via and this is in just standard, all zeroed out. Of course, the color science is wildly different. You can make comments on that in the comment section below. And you have to do, in my opinion, a lot of tweaking to the JPEG settings if you're gonna shoot JPEG in this to get colors that I would like. This, a little bit closer to what I like. I have to do a little bit of tweaking, but you can see the difference right there. And then, because this has the option, I zoomed into 72 millimeters at f2.8, and I took a picture there. Both were at 100 shutter speed, and then whatever equivalent ISO was required to have a decent exposure. But I just want to show this to you guys, the widest at their widest aperture, and then this at its widest aperture at its most zoomed in. You can see the difference there. A little bit more versatility with this, but again, having limitations of photography sometimes is a good thing, so really it's a personal preference for you. Let's see, last but not least, video on this junk, video on this much better. Oh, I got my son coming in here. Hey bud, you coming in? Talk to the camera people. Do you see him? Which camera do you like? You pick one.
Yeah.
That one? The LX?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Oh, how about that one? The Fuji?
Yes.
Okay, alright. So here's what I'm getting at, guys. When you pick these two, you really got to pick your poison. I prefer the JPEGs out of the Fuji. I prefer the ergonomics of the Fuji. I do miss some of the versatility of the LX, but you can't have it both. There's a third option I'm going to look at. I'll tell you guys about it later. It's kind of somewhere in between these two, and it's an interesting option. But I think if I had to pick the two for pure photography, I would go with the XF10 over the LX. Just because of ergonomics and like the color science out of it a little bit better for JPEGs.
No.
Really? You don't agree?
Mommy.
You wanna go see?
Mommy.
There is one caveat I wanna leave you guys with. I actually think the LX10 focuses in low light better than this. I showed you in the video a couple days ago that the XF10 does eventually focus. It just takes a while. The LX10 is actually faster. So whatever they got going on there, I think works a little bit better. It's just interesting. Anyways, that's just some ramblings and some thoughts. I got the two cameras here. One's got to go back, one's going to stay. And then I got one other camera coming that I'm going to compare to, and then make a decision. I think right now, from a photography standpoint, I'm sticking with this because of its compact size and how quick it starts up. I'm not a big fan of retractable zoom lenses that are automatic because of different motors and then how long it takes to start up. So that's kind of where I lean, so probably XF10. Which one do you prefer? XF10 or LX?
What?
LX?
Yeah, what?
That one? Okay. Just a quick couple thoughts to share with you guys if you're interested in this. Both work. Both serve their purpose. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'll see you guys in the next one.
I got few things, but if you need $1 bill in your blue jeans, I'ma throw it to you, honey, like I'm Drew Brees. I'm just happy that my crib got 2